Vacancy Legal Recruitment, a refreshingly unique and personal talent agency developed specifically for legal. Dedicated to the sector and with extensive experience working across legal services and legal technology, we bridge the gap between your requirements and top-tier legal talent. Get in touch today and say hello at vacancy.co.uk.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today we are talking about property logbooks. We have on the discussion Chair of the Residential Logbook Association and CEO of logbook provider Chimni, Nigel Walley, and Director of Homeowners Passport, friend of the pod, and sale and purchase lead at the Residential Logbook Association, Sally Holdway. You've both been on the podcast before, so it's great to have you back. Fair to say, last time we chatted about property logbooks, there wasn't a huge amount of momentum behind them. However, the very direct reference to them in the government's consultation has certainly given them a bit of a push. So very worthwhile revisiting what property logbooks are, why they're important to conveyancers, and the direction of travel over the course of the next 25 or so minutes. So thanks very much both for joining.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invite. Can I start as we need to go on and just come in and correct your one statement in your intro? Because there may not have been obvious momentum in terms of government announcements and things like that. But however, the logbook members of the RLBA have been out there selling logbooks for 5 years. So we have very quietly decided just to get on with the revolution, even without all the headlines. And so between us, we've been signing up conveyancers and estate agents to sell and distribute logbooks to members, as I say, for almost 5 years. And so we think, in general, overall the providers of every definition of logbook, there's about 500,000 out in the UK already. So yes, there haven't been much successful high-profile momentum, perhaps, but behind the scenes, we've just got on and have made it. We've put facts on the ground, as it were.
I think also worthwhile saying there's plenty of other use cases for logbooks beyond sale and purchase and transactions, Nigel. I think that's fair to say, isn't it? Particularly in the retrofit space, I think a lot of work's been going on quietly in the background there, which isn't necessarily on the radar of conveyancers.
Yeah, it's a key thing. I think that the buying and selling industry think that they're going to invent logbooks when logbooks were invented a long time ago. They're live and launched, and actually probably the biggest user case for logbooks over the next 10 years will be retrofit for net zero. Homes putting what they call low carbon tech into their homes, solar panels, heat pumps, all need to be given loads of information. And there's a massive regulatory push, which actually goes into DESNES, a different government department. And they're pushing at the moment under the government's proposed warm homes policy to ensure that every single home that has one of those bits of tech installed is given a logbook. Any kind of installation is given a logbook. And even if we were to follow Europe down the road, that EPC, having new EPC, you should be given a logbook. And EPC is tied to the logbook server. So outside of buying and selling, there's also a massive push. And what we're doing in the RLBA is like whack-a-mole. We're trying to go around all these government departments and stop them reinventing something which has already been invented, and to make sure that the single logbook standard that's in existence in the UK is the one that's used for all these other user cases.
I'm very happy to be stood and corrected. But tell us in the first instance then, Nigel, what's the Residential Logbook Association, or remind us what it is? You've been on the podcast before, I know, but as a reminder to listeners, what's the Residential Logbook Association?
So we are both the representative trade body for UK providers of digital property logbooks, and we're also the MHCLG endorsed self-regulatory body for logbooks. And it's worth just flagging up, particularly with what we're going to talk about later on about the consultation, that the RLBA was actually set up with some strong instigation of MHCLG. They got all the providers in a room back in 2018 and told us that it was very hard for them to deal with us all individually as companies. However, were we to have a representative group, they could deal with us. And that's where the RLBA came from. And they said they were very worried that logbooks could and would be used to promote property fraud. And so they wanted some kind of regulatory basis by which we were going to work and exist. And they were also very keen to ensure that any data that came out of a logbook to the conveyancing industry was, to use Sally's apposite phrase, was conveyancer grade and trustable. And so the self-regulatory part of the RLBA was set up very much at the instigation of MHCLG and the buying and selling industry through the HBSG as it was. And everything that we've designed and put in place since then, over the last 7 or 8 years, has been done specifically to provide a regulatory umbrella for the provision of what we now call upfront information. And so the only organisation in the UK that is regulating upfront information products to a conveyancer acceptable grade is the RLBA.
Sally, you're going to have to explain what conveyancer grade upfront information is and why suddenly the RLBA is the right place for it, I suppose.
Yes, conveyancer grade. Well, I would say conveyancer grade, wouldn't I, being an ex-conveyancing solicitor myself. And we've always been of the firm view. I mean, talking about logbooks, but particularly the use case of upfront information, there's absolutely 0 point gathering information together in a transaction earlier in the process unless it's to the standards which are going to be acceptable and usable by a conveyancing solicitor. And that we come at that from 2 angles. First is the data itself. For instance, information which is contained in an upfront information pack provided by an RLBA provider will come from the same sources that a conveyancer would use. So, for instance, Register Extract Service with Land Registry. Many of the logbook providers are on the LLC1 pilot as well, so we can consume data directly from the LLC1 team. But also, if we're including, say, property information questionnaires, they will be compliant with the Law Society Protocol. So at the moment, that obviously means the TA standard, which means that when that information is passed through, the conveyancers can just have confidence that it's come from the same sources that they would be using themselves. The other side of that as well, from the regulatory point of view, is that the providers also are working to the standards that the conveyancers would expect. We think of it similar to COPSO in many ways. If you accept a regulated search as opposed to an official search, you want to make sure that the providers are working to the correct standards, things like professional indemnity insurance and so on. The RLBA effectively is mirroring that with regards to any information which is gathered in a logbook, which again means that also we hopefully remove the duplication that we currently have in the process as well, with that being collected by estate agents and then effectively lawyers having to do it again. Kind of that underscores, particularly in the work we're doing in the sale and purchase space, that underscores everything that goes into the codes of conduct which we have in the RLBA.
And if we try and square the circle a little bit here, this information and the fact that it's conveyancer grade is connected to organisations like the Open Property Data Association, in that we're establishing standards and protocols by which, to your point, Sally, conveyancers can trust in, rely upon, and ultimately use in the course of a transaction in such a way that the insurer is not going to turn around and say, well, we're not very sure what the source of that information is, and therefore, it's risky.
Yeah, exactly that. And what we also need not to forget is that we do already have those protocols in place. There's amazing work going on with regards to defining digital schemas moving forwards, but we already have the Law Society Protocol, which is pretty clear on where you should get information from for a conveyancing process. So we just follow that. It's pretty straightforward, really. But obviously, the RLBA property logbooks are digital first. So any of the work that is going on in the various working groups with regards to defining what the data standards need to be moving forwards, the RLBA obviously are keen participants in.
Nigel, you corrected me at the outset of the conversation when I said that there may not have been some momentum previously, but the government consultation does very specifically make reference to widespread use of digital property logbooks. Can you, just in a bit of a nutshell, and perhaps for the conveyancing audience rather than for the wider property audience, share what that looks like in your view and why it's important for transactions now and in the future?
Yes, and we always say there's 2 parts to this story. So I'll give a quick overview of it, but I think it's worth focusing in on those 2 parts. And the 2 parts are upfront, so the sales activity, when somebody comes to put their property in the market, and at the other end, what happens to the buyer. And we're very clear in all of the RLBA documentation, they're 2 different zones and the role of logbooks are both important but different. And so at the front end, I'll let Sally elaborate on the front end bit. We always say that to a certain extent, there's two things a conveyancer needs to know about a logbook. One, it's an asset of the property they need to manage through the transaction. So at the very minimum, it needs to be listed on fixtures and fitting forms and handed to a new owner. And then the second part is, of course, a logbook can and should be a source of the conveyancer grade upfront information that Sally mentioned earlier on. So that and it's worth us asking Sally just to delve into that front end bit a bit more. And then at the back end, where you have a buyer, if a logbook was in existence beforehand, then all the information from a current transaction should be uploaded into what we call a digital handover pack, loaded up into the logbook to bring it up to date with details of the new transaction, and then handed to a new owner. And we have a mantra in the RLBA that every single property transaction should lead to a new homeowner walking away, as well as a physical set of keys, but with a digital property logbook. And it might be a brand new one that conveyancer set up because there wasn't one before, or it might be they've taken possession of the logbook that was there previously. But every single transaction should do that at the end.
You've already given a hint there, Nigel, about how logbooks can fit into the sale process. And I guess broadly speaking, we are going to be talking about the consultation again now, aren't we? Which is clearly outlined as a whole consultation on material information, but also touching on digital sale packs, which I think, again, have been around in the market really since the government last decided to do a consultation and decided that if we got information together earlier in the process, then that would be basically a good idea. And so a range of upfront information providers have developed over the course of the last 7 or 8 years and are already active in market. The digital sale ready packs are the ones which I think are probably getting the most press at the moment. There's been various pilots, all of which demonstrate what I think we probably knew back in the day, if I dare even mention home information packs, that they do reduce timescales and they do reduce fallout rates. And to say if we do them to the correct standards, then it can be a real boon for conveyancers. So the way that that's working in practice in our world with the Homeowners Passport, it's a tool for either estate agents or lawyers who want to provide services to estate agents who they may work closely with to be pulling together material information, but really ideally the digital sale pack. At the moment, that is comprising of a core documentation, which very rough and ready way is effectively a contract pack, but without a contract. So title deeds, plans, documents referred to in the title deed, lease for instance, and then the protocol forms. There are optional extras that can go alongside those. So for instance, the conveyancing searches can be included, but I think that's quite nascent at the moment because obviously that's a different process to what we would normally do. But there are certainly some providers out there who are including searches as well. Either the estate agent can click the button, or say what we're finding in more and more instances, the lawyers are getting instructed much earlier in the process. So they will receive an instruction at the point that an agent receives an instruction for listing, and the lawyer can either gather this information together themselves or use a logbook provider such as Hop or Chimney or any of the others out there to support them in doing that in a faster way, which means effectively once an offer comes in and is accepted, where that digital sale pack is in place in a logbook, contracts can be issued the same day. Time and motion studies show it can save up to about 20% of a fee earner's time on a sale transaction. So there's real benefits from conveyancers doing that. And obviously they've got more certainty around receiving the instruction earlier in the process as well. And one other element, which I think again is developing, but is how we can surface the benefits of using data rather than just flat PDF forms. So as I mentioned earlier, many of the logbook providers are involved in the LLC1 pilot. The majority of them will also take data feeds directly from Land Registry, which means that conveyancers can move away from this concept of having a shelf life of 6 months for information that's contained in documents. I mean, we've only ever historically done that because there's been no other effective way around it, is that we can't afford to continually be redoing local searches when they used to come through the post 20 years ago. So we just came up with this notional timescale that's, let's say it'll last for 6 months, but we all know a local search is out of date the very next day. There could be another entry on there. I often wonder, back in the days when I was fee earning, how many transactions I completed on where there were entries we just had no visibility of because they came in after the search came back in. And having this always on concept of these data feeds and logbooks means that we remove that risk for conveyancers. Anytime there's any change to those registers, alerts can be flagged in a logbook, and to say they can form part of the packs which are also fed into conveyancers. There's also the ability for, say, the protocol forms to be rechecked and refreshed by clients as they move through the process. So it's not just talking about moving this from a paper process to a more digitized one. It's really moving the dial and reducing the risk for conveyancers as well. So yeah, and I say once the consultations close at the end of the year, I think it's going to be very interesting to see more and more conveyancers when these spotting the opportunity that actually preparing a digital sale pack and supporting an estate agent to do that, is a key way to win more business much earlier in the process. We're already starting to see traction, but we expect to see more of that next year.
There's a broader benefit. Are we allowed to throw in some extra thoughts on that? There's this longer term broader benefit which the RLBA members are really keen on working on, particularly the conveyancing industry, which is where at the end of a process, a conveyancing firm has created and delivered a logbook to their buying client. There is an opportunity to build a longer term relationship. So we're very keen to stress that nothing we are doing threatens the conveyancing relationship with their clients. As Sally has pointed out, we think that using digital tools like logbooks and digital sale packs can cut a massive amount of hours, just admin hours, out of the process. So the initial opportunity is making efficiency and more profit for the same fee levels. But longer term, we're convinced that being the logbook provider provides them a digital basis to build a long-term relationship with that client. So rather than being the law firm that did that transaction, you become somebody's property lawyer for the life of living in that property. And that's a very subtle shift. And we're looking for conveyancers who really understand the new kind of relationship that can be built with digital tools with their conveyancing clients. And it's a hard thing to measure, but we're looking. The metrics we're looking to try and improve over the next few years are greater retention, so property people going back to the same conveyancer they used the last time, A, because they can remember who it was, and B, they have a digital link into the systems, greater cross-sell and upsell of other products like mortgage and remo and those kind of things. So there's some hard performance metrics we're looking to measure which deliver a huge amount of benefit to any conveyancer that's looking to be more efficient and quicker and better at what they're doing.
And certainly I think a lot of the conveyancers who are engaging with logbooks at the moment at the end of the process on a purchase transaction where they will set up a logbook as a value add for their clients, it's a potential additional revenue stream there because that, again, is a real value add service. And I think there's plenty of law firms out there that are doing that today. But say, again, my little moniker that I use is going back to the days when I was in private practice, it's the online version of a deed storeroom, isn't it? So people used to have to come back to me, whether they liked it or not, when after they bought property, if they wanted to sell it again, because I got the deeds. So we would always have the opportunity to see if they wanted to instruct us again. I think it's fair to say that relationship has been challenged over the course of the last 10 to 15 years with dematerialisation and also fairly aggressive tactics as far as referral and panel managers are concerned, which effectively are snaffling away clients who would have ordinarily gone back to the lawyers that they acted for previously. This is a new way to be restoring that long-term lifetime value relationship with the law firm. And I say the majority of logbook providers will very happily do dual branded or sponsored logbooks with the law firms that set them up, because obviously that first point of contact in the next transaction, whether it's a sale, whether it's a remortgage, whether it's they decide they want to do a will, having that personal contact with the law firm we see absolutely as crucial. So yeah, I think that's a rapidly emerging area as well that I think, Nigel, you're seeing particularly in your world, aren't you?
We are looking at what we can do post-transaction a lot. So once someone's set up a logbook, very often someone buys a home and they go and start remodeling. They add an extension on the roof and those kind of things. And there's lots of services and things that we can do in partnership with them that it would be great to get legal oversight. Personal note, we live near the Thames in London, and the super sewer, you may or may not know, that's just been dug across London, went underneath the end of our garden. And they had to buy, the company that was digging it, Thames Water, they had to buy the earth rights from a whole swathe of homes in West London. And we all got this letter. None of us knew what to do with it. We couldn't remember who we used to buy the house. And so we ended up looking for another law firm just to have a look over this thing. So we didn't have a legal partner. So the idea that a homeowner that's going to do lots of interesting and complex things in this world would need a legal partner was brought home to us by our own little experience of it.
There are plenty of stats out there about the number of homeowners that return to their conveyancer. I think the one that I read, or the one that we published most recently on Today's Conveyancer, was something like 1 in 10. There's only about 1 in 10 of homeowners actually return to their previous conveyances. So plenty of work to be done there, no doubt. Let's talk about some of the criticism of technology and some of the criticism of the work that's been done around modernisation, because there have certainly been accusations of organisations working in silos, working fairly unilaterally. Where does what the work of the RLBA is doing fit in with things like HMLR's digitisation project? Because to me, that's kind of that's the bit that's really, really important. We're never going to get away from HMLR. We can't come away from HMLR. They're too important in the whole process. So how do we make sure that we're working in line with where they're going in their direction of travel?
Long time ago, we highlighted HMLR as a key partner for the RLBA, and the poor people at HMLR have had us in their ear non-stop since 2018, banging on the door saying we want to work with you. And what was great about 2025 is they finally opened the door. So there's two things we're doing with HMLR going on. Sally's already mentioned one, which is the local land charges project, which is a brilliant piece of work that they're doing over there. And they have opened up the data feed to logbooks, which means that a homeowner using their logbook can now access all the information that's captured in the local land charges project if their home has been covered by one of the councils that's been processed. And secondly, which is probably going to be the more fundamental project, we are doing pre-work, I should say, with HMLR the last couple of months for a project in which logbooks are going to be given free access to the register extract data as a data feed into logbooks. And that's quite a fundamental kind of shift, where it's a mantra that we've been bashing the government with for a long time, that a homeowner should have free access to all the data that any government server holds on their property. And it's free and unimpeded access, should I say, not come to our website and give us £7 and you can see it. And so finally to be given, as we're hoping in Q1 next year, access to the register extract. So a homeowner can read what's written about their home before they put it on the market is going to be quite a breakthrough. We're very keen longer term for Land Registry to have a field in their data structure that includes the logbook number and ID, and that the logbook becomes, in a way, a deed register for HMLR.
I think it's also kind of picking up on your point there, David, around, it's almost like prop tech providers and lawyers and never the twain shall meet. I think certainly so far as logbooks are concerned, they're very closely aligned with the way that law firms would approach acting for the clients. We obviously have a regulatory obligation to act in the best interests of our client. The way that translates into the RLBA world is this concept of what we call self-sovereignty. So the owner of any property, the data about that property is theirs. They're the owner of it. They're the custodians of it. And it's up to them to decide who they will share that information with, rather than, I think there's been a perception that there's lots of data providers out there that are just looking to gather up data. So RLBA comes at it with regards to the logbook side of things, I think much more closely aligned with the approach that lawyers would have, which effectively is we are there to provide a service to support the homeowner, the client, if you like. And I think certainly, again, the work that's going on in the consultation is really helpful, just to, if nothing else, be providing just more information and visibility on how the tech providers are actually much more closely aligned with conveyancers than I think perhaps has been perceived in the past. So, yeah, hopefully along that may last, because the benefits aren't just for consumers. Hopefully we've outlined some of the benefits which we think can really move the dial for conveyancers as well.
The homeowner focus is really important, and we make the claim that we're the only body in the market who is out there fighting for the homeowners' rights to their own data, and both to access it and also to protect it, because every other industry body is out there to champion the rights of their member companies to access and use data. And so you'll hear us talking a lot about the concept of self-sovereign data, the homeowner being in control of who can see things. And also you'll hear us talking a lot about data risks. We're very conscious that there is a lot of abuse of property data going on in the market that isn't being stamped on. There's going to be a property data scandal at some point unless it's dealt with. And so we are in there championing the rights of a homeowner to say who can see their data and when they can see it. It's not necessarily data that's in a logbook either. So, a homeowner should be in charge of who the Land Registry shows data to. A homeowner should be in charge of who a utility shows their data to. And what's being envisaged in the DCIT Data Users and Access Act, as it is now, is a world in which that permissions frame covers everybody who holds or controls data in and around a property. So I think what's being planned is actually much more complex than a lot of conveyancers understand. We get asked odd questions like, is it safe to put all your data in a logbook? And we say, most of your data won't be in a log, but the logbook will control access and permissions. And I think that's a new way of looking at data that is going to be quite challenging for a lot of people. It's very new, and it's, as I say, being championed by DSIP much more than it is by MHCLG.
I know you also talk quite passionately about homeowners taking a much more active and participatory role in their logbook, and indeed the house move if that's part of the process of setting up the logbook, because we can set one up at any time. Just the fact that a transaction is a trigger point is just that. Actually, anybody can set up a logbook at any time, can't they?
Yeah, through the life of the property, and I would encourage conveyancers to go and meet all the members of the RLBA and look at everybody's product, because different companies are better at different parts of the life cycle. Some focus on right sales points, some focus on other things. So you can set up a logbook at any point through that, and our job is to make it easier for a homeowner to actually accumulate the data. So at the moment, there's probably a 50-50 mix of data that gets into a logbook automatically via an API, a computer-to-computer link, and 50% is our expectations is uploaded by homeowners. Over time, the next few years, our aim is to get that down to sort of 90-10. So homeowners have to do less and less work to make sure that their logbook has everything. And so for instance, if someone had just done a glorious new extension, they might have a paper file in their desk, and the onus would be on them to upload it into their logbook. With the LLC trial, we will be able to pull it in automatically and present it to the homeowner without having to do any work. And I think that shift to automatically compile data in which a homeowner is in control versus uploading paper is going to be a huge change point for us.
We are fast running out of time for the discussion, and this is a topic that we'll revisit time and time again. I'm absolutely certain of that. As we kind of move to a close, I wanted to talk to you quite specifically about the RLBA's response to the consultation and what you hope the outcome of the consultation will be.
Again, we're going to give you a two-part answer, because we rather greedily have put two different submission responses in. We put the main RLBA submission about logbooks, which I can talk to, but as Sally mentioned earlier on, Sally's bid has brought together a work group of all the providers of upfront information and digital sales packs, and there's a separate response specifically for that. If I just address the logbook one very broadly, obviously we were very grateful they called out the RLBA specifically, and the government has suggested that they are going to build on the work we put together over the self-regulatory system over the last 10 years, which is brilliant. But we have called, we're very supportive of the aims and objectives that the government has laid out in the consultation. We're very supportive of that. We've called for them to be a bit more aggressive in their empowering. So we've asked for one of the objectives to be very specifically not just about informing consumers, but to be actually about empowering consumers to take part in property transactions, and to reflect the fact that homeowners now use apps on their phones every day to do things around managing their home, which wasn't the case 15 years ago. We've now created, the app world have created a digitally literate and data literate customer base for the conveyancing industry, and these changes have to reflect that. So empower consumers. We've also asked them very specifically to help us with other government departments. So we've called for an all government response to logbooks, not just an MHCLG response, which includes coordinating work with DESNES and DSET, and believe it or not, a little bit of DEFRA in there as well around property product standards. So that there is a need for an umbrella process at government level. And then even within MHCLG, we've said, can we have an all MHCLG approach? Because there's a huge amount of work going on in digitising planning application work that we want logbooks involved in, and we're struggling to get them in there. There's a huge amount of work around local authorities that needs to be done. We think local authorities should be another one of those big trigger organisations driving logbooks into their customer base. So we've asked for an MHCLG approach, and then specifically within buying and selling, we've made some very specific requests for them to help us establish the RLBA self-regulatory system and the National Register of Logbooks as a key component in this framework that's being built. So that was the big thing. But I'll hand over to Sally, because we also, as I mentioned, we've actually greedily decided to.
We have had two bites of the cherry, haven't we? On the basis that I think, as we've said before, logbooks are upfront information is a subset of a logbook. So it was right that we spoke to fellow upfront information providers before submitting that response. And in short, it's a roadmap. It's a roadmap for adoption, and we see no reason at all. The market is well established. It's completely feasible also for conveyancers to be providing digital sale pack impacts themselves. So there is no capacity issue. The market is there and ready to go. And we think that government should be codifying that and issuing guidance across industry by April next year. So we're including a roadmap for that to be delivered. We'll see what the appetite is after the consultation closes. But I think the message is loud and clear. The work that's gone on over the last several years in various pockets across the country has demonstrated that getting conveyancing information and data assembled earlier in the process only has positive impacts on transaction outcomes. So anything we can do to support that, whether it's logbook providers delivering it or whether it's lawyers, and also fundamentally earlier instruction of lawyer in the process as well, is something that we would very heavily advocate. So so that's the other side of the particular coin with regards to our consultation asks from government.
As part of this framework, there's something that we've asked which I think will become more and more important. And what we're proposing through Sally's group is this trial of upfront information, a standardised version of a digital sales in market by April next year with refinements by July. So, and as Sally says, that's doable tomorrow. But what we want is, and that will be using effectively the current TA standards that are in every conveyancer's software, or 90% of conveyancer's software. What Sally's laid out in her roadmap is a journey towards the PDTF standard, the trust framework. There is some trials going on of the trust framework within the DPMSG, but they have a certain kind of moonshot quality to them. There's a certain otherworldliness to them. And what we want to see is a direct line. We want to see a roadmap that says, okay, we will get the market ready by April and then by July next year with an existing product. Here are the 4 or 5 steps by which the industry moves to a trust framework standard. And we haven't got that roadmap yet. And so the roadmap that Sally's put together is the beginnings of that roadmap. It's the building block towards an industry-wide adoption of some form of trust framework standard. Whether it's the current PDTF one or it's a revised one, whatever it may be, we need that bigger roadmap. And the only people who've actually started one is Sally and the Upfront Information.
We were just joking before we started recording that we've got another 3 hours of content based on the notes that we made in advance of this discussion. But you'll be pleased to hear that we won't be covering all of that today. In fact, we are out of time. We will no doubt revisit property logbooks as the consultation delivers its outcomes in 2026. My thanks to Nigel and to Sally for joining and sharing their insight. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Sally and to Nigel. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.